stories are told. We sit round the fire like in days of old. Heroes and demons dance in the glow. On a journey we go. On a journey we go. On Medicine Mountain, time stands still. We travel the waters where our souls drink their fill. The king and the wizard and the fool on the hill, they live in us still. They live in us still. Fire on the mountain, state of grace. Starlight pathway to the sacred place. We're walking in the footsteps of wizards and fools. Walking in their footsteps, working with the same tools. On Medicine Mountain. Medicine Mountain, spirits run free, seem even more alive than you and me. The bears are out scratching on those twisted pine trees, and I'm down on my knees. I'm down on my Medicine Mountain, the wind blows high. We dance in the starlight, raise our prayers to the sky. Yellow thunder, way up high. I can hear the hawk cry. I can hear the hawk cry. Fire on the mountain, state of grace. Starlight pathway to the sacred place. We're walking in the footsteps of wizards and fools. Walking in their footsteps, working with the same tools. On Medicine Mountain. shake me from my sleep. The hounds are loose and after me. Some folks say I gotta see that it's all inside. But I keep looking for a way out there, telling my story to the ones who care. Some days I just get so scared that it's all inside. Can't fool myself like a younger man. I'm trying hard to understand that it's all inside. I'm on a journey, old as time, traveling with this body of mine, just a mobile home with a heart and a mind. At the crossroads the love or the fear, there ain't no other way. I never thought I'd wind up alone. All I ever wanted was to build a home, and looking back, wish I'd known it was all inside. So much been taken away from me. Times it feels like everything, it could break me, it could set me free, and it's all inside. I won't let fear keep hold of me. I'll find a way, I will go free. Dark, but there's a light I see way down inside. I'm on a journey, old as time, traveling with this body of mine, just a mobile home with a heart and a mind. At the crossroads every day, choose the love or the fear, there ain't no other way.
I'd gladly walk across the desert with no shoes upon my feet, to share with you the last bite of bread I have to eat. I would swim out to save you in your sea of broken dreams. When all your hopes are sinking, let me show you what love means. Love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. And don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? Understand that love and only love can join the tribes of men. I would give my heart's desire so that you might see. The first step is to realize that it all begins with you and me. Love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge, and don't you think it's time? 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 Love and only love. Love and only love.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren Shealy. So good to have you here with us. How about a hand for the Mile High All-Stars here, too? So welcome, everyone. So glad you're here on Wednesday night, and we got a great service in store for you here. Reverend Jackie's going to be talking about civility, mere civility, and kind of repairing relationships that might be broken and how we can bring ourselves a little bit better to that game. And so I wanted to read you a little something from Yogananda about civility. We should make ourselves attractive by wearing the fine garment of genuinely courteous language. We should first of all be courteous to our immediate relatives. When one can do that, they will be habitually kind to all people. Real family happiness has its foundation on the altar of understanding and kind words. It is not necessary to agree on everything in order to show kindness. Calm silence, sincerity, and courteous words, whether one is agreeing or disagreeing with others, mark the person who knows how to behave. So let's just fall into our hearts for a moment here. And I give thanks for each person that's here tonight, for each person who's watching from a distance. I give thanks for this opportunity for us to grow closer together, to raise our consciousness in the way that we treat each other, and to build stronger, more loving communities. That's what we're about. Thank you for being a part of it. And so it is. And now back to the band.
You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. You come back with the head of my enemy. You come back and you call it my victory. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It leads me from the dry wilderness, and all I did was praise. All I did was worship. All I did was bow down. All I did was stay still. You know before I do where my heart can seek to find your truth. Your mercy is the shade I'm living in, and you become my faith and hope again. And all I did was pray. All I did was bow down. All I did was stay still, stay still. Hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better your way. Hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way. When I thought I'd lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. When I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back did was praise. All I need to do is worship. Lord, I will just bow down. Oh, I'm just gonna stay still, still.
Wow. Thank you, Lauren. What an honor to be here with this wonderful musical group. We have Lauren, of course, our soloist. We have, yay. We have Susan on the bass. We have Josh tonight on the drums. We have Dr. Kent on the keyboard and Rob on the piano. What a wonderful, and I so appreciate it. I want to say this also. All of our production people who make it possible for every service that we have to have such an outstanding service. And because I'm the minister in charge of volunteers, a special shout out and lots of hugs and love to all of the volunteers who are here this evening. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you being here this Wednesday night. I'm going to be introducing a 2-week series. Tonight is on civility. It's actually called Mere Civility, and I'll explain that. And the whole idea behind this was sparked because we have an initiative this year at Mile High Church, and it's called the Evolving Communication Initiative. So I encourage you to go onto our website sometime if you have not, and at the top of the front page, you can go to Evolving Communication Initiative, and we have blogs that have been written by our ministers, and we also have podcasts. So I really encourage you to look at that. But this whole idea of civility, I think, is a big disconnect in our country and in our relationships. That we just came out of a year that we were locked down by a virus. Who would have thought that? I kept saying, we live in 2020. How can this kind of thing happen? But it did. And then we also had a tremendously contentious election cycle. And so are we surprised that we have a little bit of a problem with civility here? And so now we're trying to come back into some kind of new normal, whatever that's going to look like. We just don't know yet. But I'm going to ask you this question. Are we going to look as individuals differently in our public and private life than we did before the pandemic? Because, you know, every facet of life has incivility in it, if you think about it. When you stand in line in the grocery store, that's one of my favorites. You know, and that person in front of you is just a little bit irritating. And do you react or don't you react? But that's only one thing. Road rage is another example of our incivility to each other. Cyberbullying, now that we get to do that on the internet instead of just doing it person to person, which we still do. So there are so many forms of incivility in our world that I think we need to look at it and think about it from the perspective of a more spiritual place that we could put ourselves into. One of my favorite, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, thoughts about incivility are family dinners around the holiday. Does anybody, can you bring in the family that you haven't seen for at least a year, and you're all going to sit down and have this wonderful meal together, but you have to say, but we can't talk about religion or politics. And the reason we say that is they're contentious for us, because unless you know that everybody sitting at the table agrees with everything you say, you certainly don't want to cause digestive problems by having those conversations. I think it's one of the times where nothing productive can occur when we get into those kinds of conversations. When I started this research, I looked on the internet, I know that surprises you, and looked at a YouTube video, and they had asked some teenagers, what they thought civility was. And these are teenagers between the ages of 13 and 18, diverse backgrounds. And so the interviewer went to each one of them, and the first question they ask is, what is civility? And to these teenagers, civility was being nice, being kind, caring for people. But the thing that struck me was they also said, agreeing to disagree. Coming from teenagers, I thought, wow, that's pretty profound from teenagers. They also said that idea of caring even if you didn't know the person. I think those are beautiful representations of what civility could be or should be for us. But then they asked them, after the kids said, well, actually, though, we think most people right now are very uncivil. And they said, well, what's it make you feel like when people are uncivil to you? Typical for all of us. It scares me. I feel a lot of fear. I feel hurt. I feel trapped. I feel confused. And I thought, those are pretty bright young people. And finally they said, how could we be more civil? And these kids said, be nice, stay positive, and if you have one of those moments when you're not civil, be sure to apologize. And I thought, wow, out of the mouths of babes. George Washington actually wrote a pamphlet. At that time, there were more pamphlets than books, that was called Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation. I'm sure you can still get it if you really want it. And the first rule in this booklet says, every action done in company ought to be with some sign of respect to those that are present. Stephen Carter, in his book Civility, says the first duty of civility is to remember being civil toward others does not depend on whether we like them or not. And I just discovered someone on a podcast by the name of Kathy Tippett, and she has a podcast called On Being. That's O-N, being. And she talks about adventurous civility. She said, adventurous civility honors the difficulty of what we face and the complexity of what it means to be human. It doesn't celebrate diversity by putting it up on a pedestal and ignoring its messiness and its depth. She says, civility in our world of change is about creating new possibilities for living forward while being different and even continuing to hold profound disagreement. And I don't think it'll surprise you when I tell you that Brené Brown speaks about civility too. She speaks about it in her book, Braving the Wilderness. And this really struck me as I read through it. She talks about this whole notion in civility, and it comes up in many things, and you probably can think of situations you've encountered around this. And it's, if you're not with me, then you're my enemy. As though there are only two ways that we can look at a situation. And I'm sure all of you have heard that said, maybe not in that defiant a way, but you've heard that. If you don't agree with me, you must be against me. And so she says, we need to take a position. What often happens in these situations, if you think about it, is we get quiet. We get silent. We go neutral. And she said, we really need to take a position rather than remaining neutral. But she says, the problem is that it's a very emotional appeal that somebody's making. And so you're going, oh, if I don't agree with them, then I'm going to be on the outside. Or, and I'm going to use something that Barry and I have talked about before, you're going to be an other. And so what we tend to do is this whole attitude preys on our own fears that we're not going to belong, or being seen as supporting the wrong part of the problem or being part of the problem. But she suggests, and this takes courage, she suggests that what we really ought to do is in those situations when you don't see yourself as an either or, a black or white, is saying, are these really the only two options? Now think about that for a moment. Can you imagine if we had the courage to say in those moments, are these really the only two options? And then she says you could also say, and I can't see me saying this, but is this the accurate framing for this debate or not? And it makes me laugh to think of, like in my family situations, if I were to say that to them, I'd get this look. Who are you? So she also says that if we maintain our silence in that black and white struggle, and that we see it on the news, we hear it, we read it, if we maintain our silence as individuals, we pay with our integrity. And as the collective, as the group, she says, we pay with divisiveness, and even worse, we bypass effective problem solving. So this is a great definition of civility. There is an institute for civility in government. Did you know that? This is fascinating. But here's how they define civility. It's claiming and caring for one's own identity, needs, and beliefs without degrading someone else's in the process. Civility is about disagreeing without disrespect, seeking common ground as a starting point for dialogue about differences, listening past one's preconceptions and teaching others to do the same. Civility is the hard work of staying present, even with those with whom we have deep-rooted and fierce disagreements. Staying present. So where did this Mere Civility title come from? Well, there's a young woman by the name of Teresa Bijan, and here's her book. It's called Mere Civility. She wrote this as a doctoral thesis. She was a religion major, and she now is in England and working at a university. But the interesting thing was, when you're writing thesis, usually a professor suggests a topic for you. So a professor suggested civility. She said, my first reaction was, civility is BS. And she said what happened once she started doing the research on civility, she came to understand that it really was much more important because it gives us an opportunity to come to an agreement, to be productive. And she says, mere that's used here in this context does not carry the belittling connotation it often does today, but rather refers to an essential minimum standard for social coexistence. Minimum, it doesn't say maximum. And so in her book, which, as I said, was a thesis, by the way, this was popularized in early 2017. It really took off. So her book is based on civility and religious tolerance. You're going to love this, in the 17th century in Europe and America. And I guess I should tell you also, I'm an original Virginian, so I'm a big history person, so I kind of love this. She began her thesis, as I said, thinking that it was all nonsense. And then she says her research led her to come to believe civility itself is really precious because it can make disagreement possible and sometimes even productive. She also talks about the importance in this whole notion of civility, of being resilient, and actually not having a thick skin, which I thought was an interesting concept. In her research, she was really talking, and we'll talk about what happened in Europe, but she was talking about the Puritans who came into America. And she said the first tolerant societies in this country were Rhode Island and Pennsylvania. And the reason these societies were seen that way was because they protected disagreements and diversity. Now, I don't know if that's still true of those two states, but I think that's fascinating that they were the first two that really supported disagreement and diversity. Civility is supposed to make our disagreements tolerable, but you know what happens? We look at somebody having some incivility, and we call that a sin of that person, and then we turn right around, and we end up also being incivil or uncivil, whichever you prefer, because that person started it. And it kind of makes me laugh because it's like kids. It's what children do. Well, you know, your children say, well, he started it. It's the same thing we can do as adults. So I think that's a really important thing. This is also fascinating, and you're not going to be surprised to hear this. In present times, we assume that or blame incivility on technology and social media. And what Bijan writes in her book is, she talks about 500 years ago, a professor of theology by the name of Martin Luther. I don't know any Lutherans from the past in the room, or any history people, launched the Protestant Reformation by being uncivil. He used the newest technology of his time, which was the printing press, and he posted those 99 theses, and basically on those 99 theses, he called the Pope the Antichrist. That's pretty uncivil, I would say. She says that, and this I think is fun to think about. Think of the printing press as the Twitter of the 17th century, and Martin Luther as the first troll. Now, are you familiar with what an internet troll is? That's somebody that gets on the internet and stirs up stuff, and so notice that in all these cases, it's the people. It's not the actual technology. It's their use of it. So according to Bijan, she says, mere civility sets a low bar for us, because remember, it's to try to connect us, the mere part. Because we take the self out, and we think about the other. There's an old Jewish story that I found that I loved, and it's about the consequences of not paying attention to what we say. There's this small town, and there's a gossip. And it's a fellow who's a gossip. He's known for this. He makes up stories. He finds stories. He tells the stories. He repeats the stories. And he hurts people. He causes pain. He causes discomfort. But he keeps doing it until his rabbi comes to him and says, you know what you're doing? And he said, oh, I had no idea. And so he says, how can I make up for this? And he said, well, take 2 pillows, go out into a field, cut the pillows open, and shake out all the feathers. He says, okay, I'll do that. So he does go out and he does that. And then he comes back, and the rabbi said, did you do what I asked? And he said, yes. And he said, but all the feathers flew all over. The wind came up. They were all over the field. The rabbi said, good. Now go pick them all up. And of course, he couldn't do that. He couldn't find them. So the moral of that story is hurtful words once spoken cannot be retrieved. And it's better to take custody of your tongue in the first place. So I looked through Science of Mind, and we don't actually talk about civility, but let me tell you what Ernest Holmes says, which I think hits it, and that is, we believe in love and law. He says, we cannot manifest love when we have a mental equivalent of hate in our hearts. We cannot manifest love when we have a mental equivalent of hate in our hearts. And the New Testament of the Bible, the book of James, says this: so the tongue is a little member and boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. What if we really believed everyone who is speaking is God speaking? I think if we really looked at people that way, we wouldn't have to be talking about civility. It would be a very natural thing for us. So the second part of the series next week is going to be Find Common Ground, and that's finding common ground around disagreements. And so your thought to go home with for the week, and this is for those of you online also, is this from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You can disagree without being disagreeable. Thank you.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, say that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word, ever with me, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I heed not, nor vain empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou me first in my heart, High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, oh bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, oh
Fantastic music tonight. Thank you so very, very much. Don't you agree? It's just fantastic. So now we're going to talk about giving, just a little bit. If this is the time in this service where we do ask you to share, and those of you online, we have several ways you can do this, share your abundance. And the first is you can text to give if you're tech savvy. Some folks have a little problem. Since I work with the contributions, I'm aware of some of these issues. You can mail in a check. You can go online to milehighchurch.org and you can give online. And you can also, if you are here in the room, we do have some bins out in the lobby that you can use. So I just want us to go into an affirmation knowing that the absolute grace of God shows up as we share and as we circulate our abundance. And this community is a beautiful example of that circulation, and we are so very thankful. So I know that God is blessing each person who is with us either online or here today, and we know that our abundance just continues and continues. Thank you, God. And so it is.
As a child, I would lay awake at night. Oh, my whole mind was filled with darkened things. In my eyes were the tears of all mankind. So blind to all our wrongful deeds. Fuel like go-go I felt, waiting for some good dough. But the answer lies not in some saving hand of grace, but in our balancing. I'm talking about freedom from the fear that holds us back. Freedom from the hate that keeps us down. Freedom, oh, to love without no bounds. Freedom, freedom, and as a child, I would lay awake at night. Oh, my whole mind was filled with unknown things. Oh, and in my mind, still the tears of all mankind. 'Cause we all are so blind to what our lives could mean. Oh, fueled up like go-go I felt. Waiting for some good dough. But the answer lies not in some saving hand of grace, but in our balancing. I'm talking about freedom from the fear that holds us back. Freedom from the hate that keeps us down. Freedom, oh, to love without no bounds. Freedom, freedom and peace. Freedom from the lunacy in our minds. Freedom from the violence in the streets. Freedom to seek the truth within our hearts. Freedom, freedom and peace. Oh, freedom like go-go I felt. Waiting for some good dough. But it not in some saving hand of grace, but in our balancing. I'm talking about from the fear that holds us back, from the hate that keeps us down. Oh, to love without no bounds. Freedom and peace. Freedom from the lunacy in our minds. Freedom from the violence in the streets. Freedom to see the truth and peace.
Yeah, Lauren Sheely, thank you very much. And the Mile High All-Stars, too. Everybody sounds great tonight. Very inspirational. Yeah, love it, love it. So I'm going to do a little affirmative prayer now. So I would just invite you to fall into your hearts for just a moment with me. We just open to the presence of the living Spirit right here where we are. I know that we are surrounded by a divine intelligence, a love, a sacred mystery beyond anything we could ever really understand, and yet we can feel it. We are a part of it, and it is a part of us. And in this glorious time of spring, when we see life bursting out all around us, all the color, all the form, all the variations, we're reminded of all these things that look like differences, how they all blend together to make this beautiful tapestry. So I affirm and know that we are connected with this one divine idea, with this one soul, with this one heart. I speak from that place right now. All of us are included in it. Our friends, our families, the ones we love, and the ones who seem so different and distant from us, of different ideas, or living with different narratives. They are part of this tapestry as well. So in this moment, we do open ourselves to a higher order of thinking, a higher opening of our consciousness, to include the people we don't know, the people we don't agree with, to open our hearts, to love our neighbors as ourselves. Not just a slogan, but a way of seeing the world. I give such thanks for our focus this evening on civil discourse among people. The foundations that humanity stands upon. The freedom that we enjoy right now. How will we use our precious freedom as we interact with each other? So I affirm and know for all of us here, all of us within the sound of my voice, that we bring the best of ourselves to our relationships, to our conversations, to our families, to those we don't know yet. We remember that a normal person is someone we don't know very well. That there are differences in ideas, differences in cultures that make us stronger and wiser when we see the gifts in each. I affirm that that is the business that we're about as we move out into the world. I give thanks for our time together this evening. I give thanks for the message from Reverend Jackie. And I give thanks for the power of my word that speaks into a law that cannot fail. I release this prayer on the wings of love and law, knowing that the work is already done. And this great mystery that surrounds us will bring us blessings greater than we could ever imagine. And so it is. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Those of you who are in the room, those of you who joined us online, thank you. And know that you're welcome here on Wednesday night. We've got room for you, and you're welcome here, and don't have to make reservations. If you'd like to join us on Sunday, we're taking reservations for one more week, and then we'll be opening up. And if you could be supported by prayer, you can go to our website, milehighchurch.org, and there's a way that you can connect with us there. So now we would ask you, those of you who are in the room, to stand up, and we're going to sing our closing song here. And if you're at home, stand up right where you are. Sing with us.